We're live, I hear.
We're live.
We're live and we have no music because of Warner Music Group torturing us. So I think, actually, before we even get started, welcome to Suicide and Stuff. If for some reason we get cut off 30 to 45 minutes into your Facebook feed, just go find us on Twitter because we got in trouble for not actually doing anything wrong. Jess, it's your turn.
Okay, so before we get going on anything else, did you know that the first time I visited you was 2 years ago today?
No.
Oh.
Well,
okay.
now I have a shitty couch. So.
You do. So this is Suicide and Stuff. Before we dive into introductions, we better talk about our rating because sometimes when I introduce myself, all the fucks start like that. So we are rated R for language, terror, and some disturbing images. I'm hoping not to be the disturbing image today, but you never know. Things could get weird. So my name is Jess, and I love talking about suicide. I wrote my intro down this time because I always mess it up. I'm a mad queer feminist, witch and healer and care worker, and I'm the director of program development at Rocky Mountain Crisis Partners. We do the statewide crisis and peer support line, the RAIN hotline, Colorado Lifeline, and a bunch of other crisis work for the state of Colorado. And I'm located in so-called Denver, which is land stolen from the Arapaho, Cheyenne, Ute, and Sioux people. And I have spent my career creating pathways for intersectional justice-based emotional support for marginalized people. I believe in mutual aid, and disability justice, and abolition, and other liberation ideology because suicide prevention doesn't work without all of that. And right now I'm super into epistemology, capitalism, and ethics in the context of suicide. If you ever want to talk about those things, look me up on the internet. Des, you introduce yourself.
I did not write down my introduction, and I hate introductions.
I know, they're weird. That's why I had to write it down.
I know, it's terrible, but now I have a new t-shirt idea for you, so that's good.
What is
Des. I'm not telling you.
Okay.
Wait until you get your other birthday present. You're going to love it.
There's more?
There's one more. You won't get it for like another month. Don't worry. I'm Des. I run Live Through This, which is a series of portraits and true stories of suicide attempt survivors across the U.S. I have interviewed both of these beautiful people for Live Through This. I am an attempt survivor, a loss survivor, a bystander. I don't know. I feel like every way you could experience suicide. Well, not every way. Let me not get too wild on that. But I've experienced it from a few different angles. And so that informs my work. I do a lot of other projects, usually involving nerdy digital things. Last week, I got mad at one of the major suicide prevention trainings, and I decided I was going to collect data about why one of the slides in that training was wrong and prove it to be wrong. So I do things like that when I'm not doing Live Through This or going to grad school or parenting two small people and occasionally being a wife to my wife. That's what I got.
All right. Shelby, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I did not write down any type of intro for me. I am Shelby, based in Oklahoma. I am Chickasaw. I work in suicide prevention. I've worn lots of different hats, worked for a lot of different roles. So it gives me mostly in the public health realm, but also in crisis intervention services. I am a mother of 3 grown sons. I am an attempt survivor. I have PTSD. And I kind of like hanging out with Des and Jess. And so when they said, do you want to be on our show? It's like, sure. So I was like, I don't know. Am I cool enough to be on your show? And they seem to think so. So here I am.
Definitely. And we had to kind of move our show to a Monday because
we did move it because tomorrow night may not be a night that we want to be like talking about suicide.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly a night that I'll be talking about suicide, but maybe not in the way
Definitely.
on this show.
Man.
Different context, I think.
Yeah, different context. My plan for later tonight is to be writing an email to our staff just about like how to manage crisis while you might have your own crisis. So I'll probably be doing a little bit of that tomorrow with folks. So I am really excited to have Shelby on. I say this every time about every guest, but that's why we pick people. It's because they're cool and have exciting things to say. So Shelby, you have like this professional kind of space in the suicide prevention world. But I'm also really interested in kind of your perspectives, and maybe more interested in your perspectives about things like storytelling and talking about colonialism and art. So is there professional related stuff that you want to talk about, or about what makes you interested in suicide, or do we want to jump into the other stuff?
You know, we can jump into the other stuff. I think with the professional stuff, I like, so it's kind of like we each have our different approaches for being advocates, activists, agents of change, troublemakers. And so I've kind of always been one to like infiltrate this, like to change the system from within.
Yeah.
And so different of when I'm like, hey, I think this can be better. I think this. And so when I was a kid, my mom would always say, like, don't complain unless you're willing, unless you've got a solution and you're willing to be part of it. I think she was just trying to teach me to stop complaining. But it made me like, I became like the main cook at my house when I was 12, different things. But it made me like, if I think that something is not being done well, to like do what I need to do to be part of the solution. So that usually for me has put me in the middle of systems. But yeah, the storytelling's way more fun. That we can, which actually like I got interested in storytelling in an anthropology class, like in my bachelor, and like how do people, what do they say about themselves? So, hi Vanessa, I'm glad that you're with us. But the way that we tell our stories, and then noticing that in the field of suicide prevention, the last 6 years, like it really hasn't been that long that people have been telling their stories publicly. Really like it just kind of blew up on the national level, where there is space on big stages. And so listening, and then when I hear some people's stories, both loss survivors and attempt survivors, I was saying we need to tell our stories as if we are the heroes of our own stories. And it breaks my heart sometimes when I hear some survivors talking about themselves. And I think that, and I pick up, if I know them well enough, I'll like pull them aside and like take them for a walk or coffee later and be like, hey, like, it's okay, and help them to forgive themselves. Because sometimes and I always tell people, like, tell your story in front of other people, because we'll internalize that discrimination and stigma and shame. And I hear it in people's stories. And I'm glad seeing both of you nodding. And I'm sure Dad's like, you've listened to a lot of people tell their story. And I'm like, oh, like I can kind of gauge of where I think someone's at. Because for me, I always speak for me. I won't speak for other people. It was a process of forgiving myself. I had to get to where I felt safe with myself. Like I tried to kill myself. And so knowing like, okay, am I safe with my own thoughts? Like, can I really? And so had to really do some self-forgiveness. And so I listen for that when I hear people telling their stories. And some of the ones that I think are more heartbreaking are the ones of other people that work in suicide prevention at some level. Either they're a therapist, they're a professor, they're a whatever flavor that we would see at national conferences. And they'll pull you aside afterwards and be like, well, I could never do that.
Yeah.
And I felt like it's not, and they're not judging me. They're judging themselves. And I don't know how we create a safe space. Like they feel less professional so I don't know. I think they project that into our field. Like they think that it's just their own personal stuff, but damn, some of them are people in powerful positions yeah. So I'm torn. What do you guys on that? Like I'm torn on, I respect that they're in their own healing journey. And I can tell from their story, they're still wrestling with forgiving themselves, but knowing like they have the opportunity to shift perspectives of a lot of people if they could just forgive themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think about that a lot, because I do get, I don't know. I think the fact that I'm not tied to an organization gives me a lot of privilege and ability to say shit that other people can't say for various reasons. So I get a lot of emails from people who are like, are you going to comment on this thing? I can't because of my job.
Yeah. So do we want to go there? So it's more yeah, let's go there. So, and I don't think that people realize, because yeah, I'm one of those people. They'll say that on different listservs. Yeah, because of I really like eating and paying my bills. And knowing that if I log on to a suicide prevention thing, that I am a professional working on, for a state agency, working on a federal grant. And when I used to work for a national nonprofit, like what I say in public, even if I'm just talking from my heart, it can be perceived as representing that organization. And so my own opinions, I can't bring them to a public forum like that. And there seems to be so many, like Jonathan saying that, because there's so many, and they're like, well, I don't know what they mean if it's not safe. It's like, we can't speak freely. And so when you wear the two hats of a public health professional and a suicidologist, but I also am an attempt survivor. And when I see things, and a Native, American, one of my beefs, I'm getting into it too early for beefs, is like with everyone started, with, so the Black Lives Matter, everyone started with like BIPOC. Yes, Beef Corner started with BIPOC. And they were like, okay, let's talk about BIPOC. And then they just talk about Black or Latinx. It was like, cool, let's talk about Black and Latinx, but don't call it BIPOC if you're going to leave out Indigenous people. I've seen that so many times. It's like, just leave the I out. If you don't want to talk about us, cool. Like, this doesn't have to be our moment, but don't add the I and then dismiss us. Like, that feels... that's weirder. That feels worse. And so a lot of stuff happening. Yeah. Yes, it is always beef time.
It's always time for beef.
Anyway, that's my little beef, but I have like several beefs, but we can. What are you guys' beef?
Oh, well.
I mean, when do we not? Are we actually beef cornering now?
I mean, we could just leave beef corner up the whole time. I have a feeling. So I super relate with the discussion around like what it means to tell your story in different ways. I am really fortunate to work for an organization that for the most part so they hired me knowing exactly who I am and what I talk about, how I talk about it, and have not done very much like restricting of what I'm allowed to talk about. There's a few things like I'm not going to make commentary about 988 generally without like some parameters and things like that. So there's a few areas, but for the most part, I'm really, really fortunate. And I think that's because, like we were talking right before the show, that I work for a nonprofit that runs a state contract as opposed to like directly working with the state. But something that when you were talking about storytelling that I connected with is like, I remember I think it was in like 2005, I took a class, like a Latino lit class, and I read Writing the Self, like Gloria Anzaldua's Writing the Self. Have you read that before?
I haven't read that.
Gloria, yeah. It was really like paradigm shifting for me to start thinking about like what it meant to tell our own stories. She wrote that in the 80s, I think. I want to say it was the 80s. It was in Borderlands. La Frontera is the name of the book, which I recommend everyone read. It's Gloria Anzaldúa and Cherry Moraga. But this idea of like not only being able to like tell your story in a way that helps to divest it from whatever the like dominant narratives are, but also in a way that gives you like a cohesive sense of self is so powerful. And I think so often when suicide attempt survivors are asked to tell our stories, it's in different ways that don't allow us to really like create this arc that gets us to a place where we can talk about who we are and what suicide meant to us, because I think in general suicide prevention is pretty afraid of us talking about what suicide means to us, because because we want to say that suicide just is categorically bad, right? But it has to mean something to people, I think, for us to really look at healing.
And I think that they don't, as a field, they hate, and a lot of people cringe, was like, most of us survive in spite of the care we received.
Yeah. Yep.
I know people like, yeah, it's like, yes, in spite of, not because of the care that we received.
Right.
Yeah. And so changing some of that, and it's like, no, like the healthcare, you know, for me, like wasn't awful, but it certainly wasn't that helpful. But yeah, it's different. It's like the people, like, and for you guys, like for me, it was the people in my life and different connections that helped me turn the corner.
Yeah.
It wasn't sitting with a therapist. It wasn't being hospitalized. It wasn't medications. That stuff didn't kill me, but it didn't necessarily change didn't make me want to live. Yeah. It was a shifting in how I saw myself in relationships that made me want to live. Yeah.
They fucking did it again.
They kicked
No, did they block us again?
What jerks. Oh my gosh. Okay, Periscope. Everybody get on our Periscope. That is so annoying. We put no sounds on this.
No sounds.
I don't actually know what to do. Like, they're just bullying us.
I know. We have like 1,000 people who watch our show.
The live video they won't release it for like a week once that happens.
Yeah. They're like,
so we lose
253 countries or something. I'm like, what?
That is so weird.
Yeah.
I just threw my phone.
I saw.
Oh man. I don't understand why they keep doing that, and I don't know what to do about it.
It's very frustrating.
It is very frustrating. Anyway, people do still watch after the fact, Shelby, but it just sucks because like we're always having a good conversation in the chat when you know, when that happens.
Yeah.
Anyway. What are we talking about?
So with telling our own stories, talk about like, the Indigenous narrative and the harm of like the Pan-Indian story.
Yes, bring it.
That generic story. Like, so this month, since it is Native American Heritage Month, to talk and gentle reminder, there are 574 federally recognized tribes, each with their own culture. So we're like, yes, you're Native. Oh, smudging. Yeah, some smudge, some don't. Some have dream catchers, some don't. Some do powwow, some don't. So just ask. Like, don't assume that whatever you saw on some Western movie on TV is what someone means by Native stuff.
Yeah.
And then because so much of the stuff was written on like what's wrong with Native people and Native families. And it's like, well, but what's right? Like you would never, and this is an extreme analogy, but you can't judge like Native, look at like what's happening on Pine Ridge or like with the Navajo reservation where like most of their water, they don't have running water because it was polluted because of uranium mining. Like we poisoned their water and all of that. and then go, oh, well, that's their culture. It's like, well, no, you like stole their kids for 4 generations and put them in boarding schools and abused them. So yeah, they kind of have addiction issues and they may not know how to nurture, but you don't judge. You don't look at a picture of Auschwitz and go, well, that's Jewish culture. Like, no,
Right.
you make it better. But for some reason, we want to look at, the absolute worst and not look at there are Native communities with very few, little to no suicides. And when you look across the lifespan, Natives have a lower suicide rate than white people, but everyone's in love with the narrative of the alcoholic, suicidal Native that we can feel. I don't know. But it's like, no, we're not all alcoholic, suicidal folks.
Yeah. I sat through a suicide intervention and assessment training today because I needed that. And I want you to know that what I learned is that Native Americans live on reservations in poverty and have drinking problems.
That's what you learned in your assessment class today?
That is what I learned today. Not even just we didn't even use the word colonization. Like it just,
and not even that like 70% don't live on reservations.
All of it.
All the stereotypes. Which is sad, like I ended up like ending a friendship, like blocking someone because they were like, they're a mental health professional. And they were like, well, yeah, when I think of a Native, they had like literally like just done like the little 23andMe and were like so disappointed that it showed they like were part Native. And like, when I think of, I just think of like homeless, alcoholic, suicidal folks. And I was just like, yeah, like if that's my dad, that's my kids. Like I think of Native men, like if that's your thought, we're looking at epistemology, if that's your worldview, that these people, I had someone, very nicely go, oh yes, my friend was part of the sponsor an elder from the Navajo reservation, because they don't take care of their elders and there's these poor old people living by themselves. And I'm like, do you know why they don't take care of their elders? And they started because it was like they had this white savior complex. And I was like, because they've stolen all the kids for generations and all of that. So that's why they're not there. They're not there because they put them all in boarding schools and foster homes, literally sold them. So that'd be why the kids aren't there taking care of their grandparents. But I'm glad that you feel good that you gave that lady a blanket and some food.
And also, don't you understand, like, the legacy, the connection between your profession, your direct connection between your profession as a mental health worker and the boarding schools? Like, the mental health community has been involved in this from the beginning with every marginalized group, right?
Taking care of, And to me, like, it's something, you listen to like Sam Brinton from the Trevor Project and stuff. It was like, like at some point we will do a present, because it's conversion therapy. Like boarding school is like conversion therapy on steroids. Like take it way over the top. But it's that same, we're going to make you completely ashamed of everything about you. We are going to assimilate you into mainstream culture. And yes, shockingly, a lot of people don't survive that because that is so detrimental to mental health that you have to be ashamed of everything about who you are.
Yeah.
I think it's really important in suicidology that we start using like systems language instead of individual language to talk about the problems that are happening. Like that we're not saying like, oh, like this group of people or people with this identity have this experience, that we're saying like, here are the things that the systems that have created this kind of struggle for people. So that the ownership then doesn't fall on like individuals, so that we don't tie. I don't think we should be tying identities to suicide like that. Like that's
Agreed.
part of the problem.
Agreed. I mean, and like one of the mainstream that I think, stick up for them too is like with veterans. Like we did, like just because you're a veteran doesn't mean you're suicidal. Like we can't. But with Native people, when we look at going, hey, if we're going to talk about the risk among Native populations, like it's a specific chunk. It's reservation-based young men, statistically speaking, are the highest at risk. And let's look at, and it's that despair. It's not being Native that puts them at risk.
Right.
But like drive through a reservation and be like, what opportunity and hope do you see? Like despair and hopelessness is everywhere. So yeah, they're going to have, that's going to affect their mental health. But yeah, that's situational. Like, let's not pathologize, make this like, this is not an illness. This is a really shitty period of oppression. Like, need more social justice.
Right.
And I'm sure, like, how like following my friends that are Black, this has been a horrible, horrible summer, right? Of the anxiety and despair, because it's like, no, you can get shot in the street, you can be murdered in the street, and just saying our lives matter is political, which is heartbreaking. Like, of course your lives matter, you're valuable. Of course, and it's just heartbreaking. It's like, and then you wonder why this affects their mental health. Like, I don't understand that disconnect.
Right.
Of like sticking up for, I just like tell people, it's like, one, I work in suicide prevention, so I advocate for all marginalized populations, because when you marginalize people, when you minimize their worth, you're gonna affect their mental health.
Yeah. Just shockingly, sometimes we want to die when you treat us like shit.
Yeah, amazingly. Yeah, when you say everyone would literally everyone would be better off without you.
Yeah.
For different ones, like Natives, like, you are a barrier to U.S. progress. Like, my son last night, just out of the blue, was talking about how much he hated lessons in school about manifest destiny. It's like, yeah, as a Native person, that's a shitty concept. You know?
Right.
Like, oh yes, doing that and exploring everything. Like with Oklahoma, it's like when you look at doing, land recognitions, it gets pretty salty, because you're like, oh yes, so this was the land, this was hunting land for, the Comanche and Kiowa and Osage and Wichita and Caddo. And then they pushed them off of it, and they made our tribes pushed us off of our land, made us buy our chunk of Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And then took that away from us too. So it's like, get in line. Like, the land acknowledgement's gonna take some time, because the land's been taken from a lot of people. So.
Yeah.
Right.
Do we want to do an official beef corner now?
Wait, hold on. Let me figure out how we can do this. So, well, for a minute, people were still able to see us on Facebook. I think that may not be the case anymore, but I don't know. Official beef corner, your favorite video.
Gross every time.
Did you guys see all the cute little kids dressed as Carol Baskin for Halloween?
I did not.
That's great.
I was too sad about fucking Halloween. I just kind of checked out over the weekend. Like, we love Halloween so much. It was just so sad to not be able to participate. But yeah, we watched, I don't know, we watched a movie about a square pumpkin, and I did not look at pictures of all the children dressed like Carol Baskin.
All my kids are big now, but yeah, I can see if my kids were little and still at the making memories phase, I would be bummed out.
Yeah, it wasn't great. It wasn't great. And I was like, maybe I'm doing them a disservice. I don't know. Should I have gotten them costumes so they could walk around the house in them? But yeah, so I just tried to pretend it didn't exist.
I think there'll be other times,
There
Halloween.
will.
They'll remember, and it'll be great.
Yeah, it'll be fine. It just didn't feel great in the moment.
Yeah.
So officially beef time now. Wow, I have a lot of beefs with whatever's going to happen tomorrow. I don't even know what it is. But I know I'm about it.
Yeah. Dreading it.
Yeah. Other beefs include Colorado's COVID rates are like rapidly increasing. And meanwhile, we're having like football games here and shit. And I'm just like, what is happening? How? So yeah, generally there's like no shortage of fuckery. Everything keeps getting worse. Nothing that happens tomorrow is going to be okay because there's no good outcome. And yeah, I'm not feeling super positive and cheerful these days.
No. And I keep having to like validate my feeling, because it's easy to sit and like try to minimize.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, no, because like my PTSD, I know it's like when my concentration is like a squirrel and I'm going into every room going, why am I here? Why did I come into this room? And to go like, okay, it's like, oh, like what's wrong with you? And it's like, you're in the middle of a global fucking pandemic. Nothing like this has happened in 100 years, so it's okay. And then all the political stuff, like, yes, my brain is correct to be sensing uncertainty and things could be bad. But yeah, I'm trying to talk myself out of freaking out and then validating myself for freaking out.
Right. Yeah.
And then I have like one of like the weird beef of being a suicide attempt survivor and being out and open at another time. Maybe like let's do like a Valentine's Day thing because I need like help on like dating as being an open and out attempt survivor. I have like someone I liked and they're like, I want to know more. And I was like, well, I said, why don't you go read about my story on Live Through This and then we can talk about it. Like, and then I think it like freaked them out. And like within a week or so, they were like, yeah, I think we'll just be friends.
Boo.
But so when I like post on this, like during the pandemic, like, hey, like my mental health is shit right now. And then people are like, oh, and putting on there like one, oh, but you have so much to live for and stuff. And I feel like the old movie, like the kindergarten like one, it's not a tumor, lol. Like just because I'm having a bad day. Like if I'd had a heart attack, would every time I had a runny nose or a headache, you're like, maybe you're dying. Like, why is it?
You have so much to live for.
It's an annoying beef. It's like, no shit. I know. Like explaining to someone the other day, I was like, they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm fine. I'm very misanthropic at the moment. And I think most of the world is full of horrible human beings, but I'm great. Why it's like, yes, I'm an attempt survivor. Yes. Like, please don't assume every time I have a bad day that I'm suicidal.
Or that even if I'm suicidal, that it means like something has to happen. Like,
yeah.
I'm suicidal all the time. It's cool. I mean, it's not always cool, but it's like, not an emergency. And certainly not one that anyone else needs to be managing unless I'm asking you to.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if they realize how they're really shutting down. It's like, because when I am really struggling, I'm not like you're discouraging help-seeking behavior.
Right.
Your like eagerness
Shelby,
to make
reach out.
What?
Reach out. Just reach out.
Yeah, reach out. Right?
Touch
Reach
someone.
out. But every time you're like going, well, today sucks. And I try to model that because I always tell people to reach out because I am like one of those public health professionals. But then every time I do, I'm just like, stop. Why can't I just be a normal person having a bad day? Like, can I just have a bad day? Like, not everything has to be. It's like, yes, I survived a suicide attempt. Yes, I talk about that because it's important to me to make it easier for other people to talk about. I think it may be one of the least interesting things about me.
Yeah.
But there we are.
Yeah, I mean,
there we are.
There we are. Like, this is the least interesting thing, and it's what I'm the most well known for. That's the irony of my world.
I think especially if I were to like, we don't do this, right? But if we were to get into like details about my suicide attempts, they're extremely boring. Like, you've watched something much more dramatic on every movie ever made. I can tell you that. Like this, it's boring and I'm bad at it.
Right. I mean, it's boring even for like an after school special. Like it's boring. Like this is it's like a weird 80s family sitcom.
Yeah. Oh god. Okay, Des, what you got for beefs? Because you've been going to all kinds of trainings and shit, and everything is stupid.
Yeah, you probably have lots of beefs of them teaching you all about suicide and mental health.
Man, you know what? Like, gatekeeping is a fucking problem, but the lack of gatekeeping too is a fucking problem. And I don't know what the answer is. I do not know what the answer is, but I will tell you that I am sick of hearing about how Native Americans are alcoholics. And I am sick about hearing about how Black people don't kill themselves. And the white men are the most important people that we need to be thinking about in this field. And that suicide just affects men generally more than women. And we don't think about all the people in between. And all of the other fucking numerous things that I could comment here about. It's so hard to be a student when suicide comes up so often in this field, and the people who are talking about it don't know the first thing. They want to spout off some statistics and say some shit. And then the guy today was using statistics from 2016, no less. Additionally, he told us that nobody really knows anything about suicide in the trans community. He cited a study that came out in 2005. That was the last known work that was done in terms of information gathering about the trans community. And I was like, how are you teaching? How are you doing this? And that's the only comment I left in the chat today. I was like, Trans Lifeline put out some work on this a couple of years ago, and we know that
the
maybe
Williams
like 40
Institute
to 50%.
did some stuff. Like people have done
Trevor
stuff.
put out some good stuff this year. Like, fucking pay attention. You cannot do this work. You cannot teach about it if you are not constantly engaging with it. And you have to be. It changes too quickly.
Well, just do like a simple Google, before you make some dumbass statement like that.
It is sad because so many, there's not those standards of this is what you need to learn. Right. And they just like make up their curriculum. Like it's as if the whole field, which it's got to be super frustrating for you. It's like, hey, there's this whole field, suicidology. But they're like, no, I'm just going to make it up. Whatever I think, that's the truth. That's the world that I'm going to teach. And so many of the other students aren't looking at it with the critical eye. Like they're walking away going, this is the truth. And it's, damaging. And the damage that they're going to do to their clients. That all natives. I had someone call me today and they're like, oh, yes, I want to talk to you about what is it about Native Americans that make them high risk or like in those communities. I was like, you realize most of us like are your next door neighbor. And like, we went to the same university. You went to like those communities. You mean like your neighborhood? Like we're not living in teepees, like in Dances with Wolves, like most natives. Like, yes, there are rural reservation communities, but it's like that's and those are atrocious if you want to talk about that, but most Native Americans don't live on reservations. We live just like you guys. Right? We live just like you guys. For good or bad, because you've worked real hard to make us live just like you. So
it's so rough. I don't know. I keep thinking about like, what is the answer? Because usually I live tweet when I do these things. I'm like, and then you fucking said this. And so I probably sound like a dick, like truly a lot of the time. I was told yesterday a lot that I'm a dick on Twitter. And that's fine, whatever. It's a process. So I'm thinking about like, what is the lowest common denominator we need in these trainings? And I think that I've come to we need to teach people who were training that suicidal people are people, but we're not
What?
doing that. We're not fucking doing that. If the stats are wrong, I don't care. I don't think the stats are super valuable unless you're connecting them back to people constantly. We don't do that. We're not connecting it back to people fucking ever. We're detaching ourselves from it and running away in fear and talking about liability. And I'm just like, well, here's your proof about why the fucking suicide rate continues to rise, because you're not humanizing it. And it's so frustrating. And that's
If
my
we
beef every day.
treated one thing that I want to do in my career, I'm 48, so I'll probably have like 20 more years. If we can like banish to where no one ever says the phrase frequent flyer ever again, ever again. Like, because I talked to him, like, like, you don't, anyone else with chronic, serious health conditions, like, to me, individuals who are chronically suicidal, it's just as if they have, like, I've got a friend, her son has juvenile diabetes, and puberty is shit for him. They're in and out of intensive care units all the time because as his hormones level change, it is wreaking havoc. Like, if he survives to adulthood, they're always at the hospital. They don't call him a frequent flyer. No. You know, like you go like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, you have this serious life-threatening illness. And for some of us, our mental health are serious, life-threatening, that it's not going to go away. Like, you need chronic intensive care. Like, you periodically need, why do we treat everyone like shit and act like, oh, well, clearly since you're still sick, it must be you're not compliant. You're not. It's like, no, maybe I'm just really, really sick and what you're doing isn't working. So be creative, be compassionate. But we treat people with mental health. Like, if you're going to go with the medical model, do it like you mean it. Yeah. Like, treat them like someone with cancer. Right. Like, but we don't. We treat people like shit and then wonder why they don't come back to be treated like shit again.
Yeah, we're like, reach out, not too much and not in the wrong ways, and make sure you reach out and you only do what we tell you to do, and be nice and be thankful that you're alive, even though you're suicidal. Like,
right.
What?
And then if you die, it's like, well, why didn't they reach out? And it's like, I don't know. Right. Maybe because the 100 times they did reach out, you were really shitty to them.
Yes.
And then there's no follow-up, right? The best interventions that we have most places, it's like, go to the hospital and they're like, we don't really want you. We need to make room for somebody else.
Right.
Right.
And then they wonder why you don't go back. No. And then it's like, okay. And so it's, like, we've got to make that better and like shifting those perspectives on that. I am happy. I am encouraged to see them like shifting more to at least with the care transition. So we'll see over the next 5 years of like, yes, following up, actually caring about the outcomes. Like someone going like, how are you doing? Like, I know we sent you home yesterday, how are you doing? Not just did you get your prescription filled, but really like, how are you doing?
Mm-hmm. Right. I'm excited. We got a grant in my organization to run follow-up for all of the hospitals in Colorado. That doesn't mean that we're actually going to get all the people enrolled. People have to choose to participate in all of that. But what's cool is through our program, people can also select peer support, so they don't have to get follow-up. They're not getting follow-up from the hospital. They're getting it from like crisis workers or peers, and they can choose. And I think that's just it's really exciting to me that that's an option that people have, because like there are at least a few times I would have rather talked to a peer, like all of them, than a medical professional or a mental health worker, really.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I do like it. I mean, one thing that I'll say, like is like when I moved back, like of all the things that are backwards about Oklahoma, that their Department of Mental Health like really believes in recovery and like has a lot like peer recovery support specialists are big, very much integrated. A lot of the leadership at the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health are suicide attempt survivors, are people living in recovery, and from things. And so that makes a difference in decisions that are made when you've got your, senior director of communications, your director of strategic partnerships, and others that have lived experience, that have that peer experience, that lead support groups, because you need that. You need people making decisions about money to know what it's like to be in those shoes.
Mm-hmm.
That's really
the mic. Was it silent?
Really unusual. Oh. What did you say, Des? I talked over you.
I just asked if she dropped the mic.
Yeah, that was a good mic.
So I don't know. So one of my fun things, I will say a sneak peek of my new job, but I won't say what it is because I'm not representing them.
Right.
But I get to call bluff for a lot of national groups who always talk about how important it is to engage peers.
Yeah.
So we're going to do that. So I've been tasked, and it's going to be like way bigger than I think what they thought when I got the assignment.
Oh, I'm sure.
So stay tuned. I did make a list. I went through like doing the nerdy today of everyone who's on like all of these committees. And I have my little spreadsheet of who's got lived experience, what region of the country they live in.
Mm-hmm.
For me, because if you tell me I have to increase something, I'm a total nerd and I have to know what the baseline is.
Yep.
So I'm like creating my baseline.
Oh, well, if you need someone to come flip tables at any meetings, metaphorical tables, because I'm going to sit right here.
So I'm excited about that one of giving meaningful seats at tables.
Yeah.
To people with all sorts of lived experience. So yay. So good stuff is coming.
That's exciting.
It'll probably take me like a whole year to build the infrastructure for it.
Oh, yeah.
And then start getting it. But starting to create that baseline. And I've got to have awkward conversations with about 100 people because I don't know their personal experience. I need to know so I can categorize them properly on my baseline chart.
That, it shouldn't be an awkward conversation for people who work in suicide prevention, but it's totally going to be.
Right? Isn't that weird? Like it should be like, why are you involved? Have you been personally affected? And for some reason, it's like a super awkward conversation in our field.
Okay.
Yay, I'm glad that Jane's excited about it. I'm excited about it. I mean, it's a nerdy infrastructure thing, but it's big. Like it can really pivot a lot.
Stuff like that change things in really big ways.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to make sure that we get to talk about art stuff.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. We have 10 minutes left. I mean, it could be more, but officially.
Because Shelby does really cool art shit.
Yes.
Way cooler than any art shit I knew.
Yeah, same.
Thanks. And it's weird because like I made like a solid C- in art in elementary.
My mom is an artist, and I feel like it made me scared to do art because I'm a perfectionist and I didn't want to be bad at it, so I wouldn't try, which is a cool move,
right? And it is that weird. And I think for me, and I realized I told someone, so I taught myself, I do beadwork, and I taught myself how to do it. And I'm so glad I did, because when I was teaching myself, I had no idea I was doing it wrong. And so now that I'm doing it well, and I just naively, like when I was like, oh, I think I'll do an art show. And then realized when I got there, like, Shelby, you dork, like you signed up for the biggest art show in the world for your very first, like most people do like a little local community thing. No, my very first art show in the world was the Santa Fe Indian Art Market.
Wow.
Go big or go home. Like I got there and I was like, who does this? Like me. But I didn't know that I was doing it wrong. And yeah, had I gone to art school or something, the perfectionist in me, I never would have discovered how much I like doing this.
Yeah.
had I worried about doing it right.
Well, yeah.
Because I do it different. Yeah, I don't do it right. I don't do it the right way. I don't know how to do the traditional native beadwork, but I love what I do. And fortunately, other people love what I do too.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
Tell me about how art, like beading specifically for you, is connected to like suicide prevention and telling our stories. And like, why are we talking about the beadwork here?
So for me, I do beadwork with lots of little tiny beads. And when you look at them like beads, and you'll see it's little bitty pieces of broken glass.
Mm-hmm.
And so like you're mending something that's broken. And suicide prevention and stuff, and we all have our stuff, but it's like we can heal, we can mend, but it takes like deliberate care and attention to heal. And so with that of beading, for me mentally, that's symbolic of, in my work, I focus on passion about helping people mend.
Mm-hmm.
And then I mend broken in our souls at work, which is weird how spiritual suicidology is, that we don't really talk about, but it's very spiritual. And then in my beadwork, for me, is just mending, it's putting lots of little pieces of broken glass together to make something pretty. And things like, I've saved my mistakes because I am such a huge perfectionist. And I'll do stuff and I'm like, damn, like I've got this little pile of hundreds of mistakes. But then I look at the big piece, I have this piece of art, and it's like, oh, even the mistakes are pretty. Like it's just pretty little. And so it's helped me to heal. And then for me with PTSD, beading is grounding because I have to, it's my meditation. I have to count my beads. I can't think about the past. I can't be thinking about stuff for the future or I'll mess up. I have to be in the present. And that's important to me because I'm someone who always struggles with being present. And when I'm sitting and doing my beadwork, I'm present. So it's helpful for me. It's very symbolic to me. I'm doing a cool piece that someone told me, they're like, oh yes. And they told me about one of their friends, just a two-spirit healer who lives, I think, up in Michigan. And they for ceremony, and they do a lot of spiritual work with suicide loss survivors. And what they go into ceremony to retrieve the souls, because for some tribal people, like people that die a sudden traumatic death, and suicide often is a sudden traumatic death, that their spirit is confused and it doesn't always make its way home to the ancestors. And so in the ceremony, they go in, so they talk with the family and they tie a little string. They have they wear this big buffalo. They tie a string on it that's got the name of that person, and they go in praying to look for their spirit and guide them to their ancestors. And this person told me the story, and it was beautiful. And they're like, yes. And their first ceremony they did by themselves. And their regalia is cool because it's half masculine, half feminine, because that's how they are. And they totally said, yeah. And they went in. The first person that they went to retrieve was my brother, the person who told me the story. Was like, that is awesome. And they showed me a picture of them in their regalia. And they're just standing on their back porch. And I sent it to a friend of mine who's a graphic artist. And I'm like, I need you to help me magnify this. It's a cool image. The story gives me goosebumps. And so they magnified it. And I'm doing this big epic. I'm not even a third of the way done. Notice this is just, I just went above the waist. But it's going to be cool. But yeah, doing this piece, I got started on it. And this woman that I know just indirectly who lives in Nebraska reached out. She goes, oh, you do beadwork. I've got these beads in my garage. Do you want them? And I started to say oh, well, I only use this one special kind of beads. I'm kind of a bead snob, but I didn't. I was like, yes, if you want to offer me beads, I would love to have them. And after she got my address and dropped them off, she said, these beads belong to my daughter who died by suicide 25 years ago. And I was like, you have no idea. Like, so I'm going to use those beads to build like the little ceremonial tassel to go on the horn of this god, or to give me goosebumps. But yeah, so it's very much suicide prevention in my bead work.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
That's
stay
cool.
tuned. I have this epic thing, but it will take me forever. Well, yes, by May-ish, because I've got other commission pieces to do between now and then. But I will get this done. And it's so meaningful working on this piece. So
Yeah, that's cool.
sorry, I took almost all our time talking about art because I love to talk about my art.
Yeah.
No, I love it.
think it's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Des.
That's all I had. I love it.
If you like my art, my website is shelbyrowe.com because some bitch bought shelbyrowe.com and they're just
Can you
sitting on it.
believe?
They didn't even build a website. So I have my middle initial. Like if they built a pretty website, I would not be salty about it at all. But don't buy the domain and then not do anything with it. So it's shelbyrowe.com.
Have you are you sure that it's this bitch and not just someone who bought a name and is sitting on it? Like, have you reached out to them?
I haven't reached out to them. It's somebody, some random person bought shelbyrowe.com.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I say that it could be, there's like a Shelby Rowe that like had like some serious illness and died, and I could be a horrible person. Her family may have bought the site and they may be like working up, the healing until they can do this site to honor her, and I'm just a horrible person. But anyway, that's why I have Shelby R. Rowe, because someone else had Shelby Rowe.
Well, you could reach out to them and see if they'll let you buy it. That was what I was gonna say.
That is something I could do. And would make it easier, people. When I tried to email you and it didn't go there, I tried to go to your website and I was like, did you do Shelby Rowe or Shelby R. Rowe? And they're like, oh.
Yep.
It's like, yes, you have to put the extra R in there.
Yeah.
The
remix.
Yes, the remix.
I think what's just kind of surfacing for me about our conversation, because we're like really close to the end already. I knew it was going to be like this, where we had way more things to talk about. But, I think part of what's cool about doing this show for me is that when we talk about suicide prevention or when we talk about suicide in most professional spaces, all we're talking about is assessment and safety planning and intervention. And like suicide prevention isn't that. Like suicide prevention is telling our stories and telling our stories in ways that are like meaningful and helpful to people. And suicide prevention is like finding something that can connect you to like both your ancestors and all of these other people, that also like provides some sanctuary for you, like doing your bead work. And suicide prevention is like all of the small conversations that we have where we're supporting each other. It's not assessment and intervention and all of that all the time. And most of the time it's not that. Like even working in a crisis setting, like I don't think we save people's lives. I think we hold some space for them to figure out how they can save themselves or how they can save each other. But we're not doing that as professionals, really. So we need to find some other ways to honor that other work, and to bring it into suicide prevention in a more meaningful way.
Yes. Yeah, so well said. I think one of my dream jobs, COVID got in the way of that. Like I'd been planning like this epic road trip. Like I really want like some museum. I'm looking for like artist fellowships because I want to take a road trip and like go see, because of working in suicide prevention, I know all of these really amazing people. And to go around and do stay with people for a week at a time and do like a little project, but really like just write the story of the connection with these people, because like that's what keeps us all alive. It's the connections. Like we're herd animals. like we are not meant to be. That whole rugged individualism myth is deadly. Like we need each other. And so spending time, that's the most healing, is having that real, genuine human connection with people. So so stay tuned. One day I may like call you and say, I would like to spend a week at your house. And then we'll do some art, we'll take a selfie, and eventually it'll be a book.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that idea.
If you come to my house, you'll sit on my couch and we'll eat cheese fries for a whole week. Like that's
I am down for that.
We get shakes and we get bagels in the morning.
Can we put bacon on the cheese fries?
Yes.
Yeah.
If I can negotiate bacon on the cheese fries too.
You never have to negotiate bacon ever.
Okay.
So I found this place here that does like it's a Greek place, so it does like the shaved lamb on their cheese fries.
What?
It's real good. Real good.
Man.
That would be delicious.
All right, lots of ways to eat cheese and fries.
Okay, so we will have to do it. Yeah, I mean, I can't afford to do this like year-long sabbatical traveling and collecting stories, but it's going to happen. I don't know when, but it's going to happen.
It sounds real to me.
Let it have its time.
Yeah.
I've been doing Live Through This for a decade.
It out there.
Yeah.
So if anyone watching this wants to sponsor my project, I could get you a budget just like that.
There are
the budget
benefactors. So if we could.
Yeah, all three of us would like a benefactor.
You would love a benefactor.
Yeah. I don't want to have to do anything different for it, but we could discuss it, I guess.
Yeah, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing and like have money to the point where I don't have to like, you know, struggle quite as much, like maybe pay like a student loan or something.
Somebody want to pay me for my opinions? You know, something like that.
We do have a talk next week. So yes, a couple of people do want that.
That's true.
Some people do pay us for our opinions.
That's true. Oh, Shelby, thank you so much for coming on. This is awesome. I'm excited. I actually have to go directly after this to run my abolition study group because I just made too many commitments today. But yeah, abolition is also suicide prevention. Next time we have Isabella Garcia. I'm really excited.
She is awesome.
Yeah. So excited for more, you know, opinions about the fuckery.
Yes. 2 weeks. And there will be a lot that takes place between now and then. So.
Oh yeah. I am fucking horrified. I can't think that far into the future. Like I put that little banner together a couple of days ago and I was like, I don't even know. Like we might be blown up by then. I don't know what the fuck's happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yay.
We will see. We'll see what happens.
All right. Thank you all. Thanks for watching people who found us on Periscope since Facebook's being a dick.
Really positive end here, guys.
All right.
All right.
All right. End broadcast. Goodbye.
All right. Good night.